Tomorrow morning, before you do anything else, I want you to notice one thing. The moment you open your eyes, before you reach for your phone, before you get out of bed, is your mouth dry? Not just slightly parched, genuinely dry, sticky. The kind of dry where your tongue feels like it is adhering to the roof of your mouth, and the first thing your body wants is water. If the answer is yes, you have been waking up with a signal your body has been sending you every single morning, and almost nobody is teaching people what that signal actually means. A dry mouth when you wake is not just dehydration from the night. It is not just an inconvenience. It is not something to fix with a glass of water and forget by breakfast. According to research published across pulmonology, neurology, endocrinology, and oral medicine, a consistently dry mouth upon waking is one of the most reliable surface indicators of several internal conditions that are simultaneously underdiagnosed and, when caught early, highly treatable. Your body has been running a diagnostic while you sleep, and every morning it is leaving the result on your tongue. Today I am going to walk you through exactly what a dry mouth upon waking is telling you. Not one possibility, the full list, because the cause determines the consequence. And the consequence is what you need to understand before you drink that glass of water and move on with your day. Before we get into the causes, you need to understand what saliva is actually doing in your mouth overnight, and why its absence is a meaningful biological signal rather than a cosmetic inconvenience. Saliva is not just a digestive fluid. It is a complex biological medium containing immunoglobulins, antimicrobial peptides, growth factors, electrolytes, bicarbonate ions, and over 40 enzymes. During the day, your salivary glands produce between 0.5 and 1.5 liters of saliva. During sleep, production drops significantly. This is normal, expected, and the reason most people wake with a slightly drier mouth than they had going to bed. A thin coating of saliva overnight is still sufficient to maintain the oral mucosal lining, buffer acid, suppress bacterial overgrowth, and protect tooth enamel from demineralization. When that thin protective layer is absent, when you wake not just with reduced saliva, but with genuine dryness, stickiness, or the sensation that your mouth has not been moistened at all, something has prevented even the minimal overnight salivary function from occurring. And the question of what prevented it is precisely the diagnostic question worth asking. Saliva production is controlled by the autonomic nervous system. The parasympathetic branch stimulates salivary flow. The sympathetic branch suppresses it. Any physiological state that activates the sympathetic nervous system during sleep, stress, hypoxia, blood glucose instability, medication effects, autoimmune disruption, will reduce overnight salivary output. Your dry mouth is, in many cases, a surface expression of a systemic autonomic imbalance that is worth identifying. The most common cause of waking dry mouth that most people have never connected to their symptoms is mouth breathing during sleep. When you breathe through your mouth during sleep, the continuous airflow across the oral mucosa evaporates the thin salivary film that would otherwise remain overnight. The mucosa desiccates. You wake dry. But here is the critical point. Mouth breathing during sleep does not happen in isolation. It is almost always caused by something. A partially obstructed nasal airway, enlarged tonsils or adenoids, a deviated septum, nasal polyps, allergic rhinitis causing mucosal swelling that blocks nasal passage, or, most significantly, obstructive sleep apnea, the condition in which the airway repeatedly collapses during sleep, causing the brain to partially arouse to restore breathing, driving the sleeper to open the mouth and breathe through it. A 2017 study published in the Journal of Clinical Sleep Medicine found that dry mouth upon waking was reported by 57% of patients with diagnosed obstructive sleep apnea, compared to 19% of matched controls without sleep apnea. Dry mouth was a more sensitive early indicator of sleep-disordered breathing than snoring in this cohort, because partners are required to report snoring, while dry mouth is self-reported. People who live alone, people who do not share a bed, people whose partners are heavy sleepers, for all of these people, morning dry mouth may be the only observable signal of a condition that is fragmenting their sleep architecture, reducing oxygen delivery to their brain, producing measurable cognitive decline and cardiovascular risk over time. If you wake with a dry mouth and you also experience any of the following: unrefreshing sleep despite adequate hours, morning headaches, difficulty concentrating in the first hour of the day, or fatigue that does not resolve with caffeine, those four signals together form a pattern that warrants evaluation for obstructive sleep apnea. Not eventually, soon. The second cause is one that most people would never associate with a dry mouth: blood glucose instability during sleep. Your blood glucose does not flatline during the night. It continues to fluctuate in response to your liver's overnight glucose output, your insulin sensitivity, the composition of your evening meal, and your stress hormone levels. In people with insulin resistance, prediabetes, or undiagnosed type 2 diabetes, blood glucose can rise significantly during the overnight hours, a phenomenon called the dawn phenomenon, driven by the cortisol and growth hormone surge that naturally occurs in the early morning hours, and which stimulates hepatic glucose output. Elevated blood glucose activates osmotic diuresis. The kidneys filter excess glucose into the urine, pulling water with it, increasing urine output and depleting fluid volume. This systemic dehydration expresses itself, among other places, as a dry mouth. A 2020 study published in Diabetes Care found that nocturnal hyperglycemia was independently associated with morning dry mouth complaints in patients with type 2 diabetes, even after controlling for medication use and overall hydration status. But here is the part that makes this diagnostically significant. Excessive thirst and dry mouth upon waking are two of the three classic early symptoms of undiagnosed type 2 diabetes. The third is frequent nighttime urination. If you are waking with a dry mouth and also notice that you are visiting the bathroom more than once during the night, and that your thirst in the morning feels disproportionate, these three signals together are not a coincidence. They are a metabolic pattern that warrants a fasting blood glucose test, a test that costs almost nothing, takes 5 minutes, and catches a condition that, undiagnosed, silently damages the kidneys, the eyes, the peripheral nerves, and the cardiovascular system over years. The third cause is Sjogren's syndrome. And this one matters because it is one of the most underdiagnosed autoimmune conditions in medicine, affecting an estimated 4 million Americans, the majority of whom wait an average of 4 to 6 years from symptom onset to diagnosis. Sjogren's syndrome is an autoimmune condition in which the immune system attacks the body's moisture-producing glands, primarily the salivary and lacrimal glands. The result is chronic dry mouth and chronic dry eyes. The dry mouth in Sjogren's is not the mild morning dryness that resolves after drinking water. It is persistent throughout the day, accompanied by difficulty chewing dry foods, altered taste, accelerated dental decay, and a sensation of oral burning. A 2016 study in Rheumatology International found that the average number of physician visits before a Sjogren's diagnosis was 4.7. During those years, the autoimmune process progresses. Sjogren's is associated with increased risk of non-Hodgkin lymphoma, peripheral neuropathy, and systemic vasculitis in a subset of patients. If your dry mouth persists throughout the day, if you also experience dry eyes, joint pain, or fatigue, and if you are female between 40 and 60, a blood test for anti-SSA and anti-SSB antibodies is the first-line screen, available at any laboratory. The fourth cause is medication, and this is the one affecting the largest number of people without their knowledge, because the list of medications that cause dry mouth as a side effect is longer than almost anyone realizes. Over 500 commonly prescribed medications list dry mouth as a documented side effect. Antihistamines, antidepressants, antihypertensives, diuretics, antipsychotics, muscle relaxants, bladder medications, and many over-the-counter sleep aids all reduce salivary output. Through anticholinergic mechanisms, they block the parasympathetic signals that drive salivary gland activity. If you take any of these and wake with a dry mouth, the medication is likely a contributor. The important question is not just whether to tolerate the side effect. It is whether the dry mouth is producing secondary consequences worth addressing: accelerated dental decay, oral fungal infections, and disrupted oral microbiome. A 2018 review in the Journal of the American Dental Association found that medication-induced dry mouth was associated with a 2.4-fold increase in dental caries risk. Your pharmacist can review your medication list for anticholinergic burden and identify alternative agents with lower dry mouth risk. This is a conversation most patients never initiate because they do not know the connection exists. The fifth cause is chronic stress and elevated cortisol, the mechanism connecting dry mouth most directly to your nervous system's overall state. Cortisol is the primary stress hormone of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. In people under chronic psychological stress, cortisol remains elevated not just during the day, but overnight, disrupting the normal nocturnal drop that should occur in early sleep. Elevated cortisol activates the sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system suppresses salivary output. The result is reduced overnight salivation and a dry mouth upon waking. But the cortisol connection goes further. Chronic overnight cortisol elevation disrupts sleep architecture, reduces slow-wave sleep, elevates fasting blood glucose, suppresses immune function, and accelerates inflammatory processes. Your dry mouth is the visible tip of a systemic disruption simultaneously affecting your sleep quality, metabolic function, immune competence, and cardiovascular risk. A 2021 study in psychoneuroendocrinology found that morning salivary cortisol levels were significantly elevated in subjects reporting chronic work-related stress compared to controls. The saliva researchers used to measure cortisol, a well-validated biomarker of HPA axis activity, is collected from the same dry, stressed mouth delivering its warning every morning. Your body is not being subtle. Here's what I want you to carry out of this video. A dry mouth when you wake is not a minor inconvenience to solve with a glass of water and forget. It is a morning diagnostic, one your body is running every single night and delivering the results of every single morning. Mouth breathing and sleep apnea, blood glucose instability and undiagnosed diabetes, Sjogren's syndrome and autoimmune disruption, medication-induced anticholinergic suppression, chronic stress, and HPA axis dysregulation. Each of these produces a dry mouth through a different mechanism. Each has different consequences if left unaddressed. And each is identifiable through a sleep study, a fasting glucose test, an autoimmune antibody panel, a medication review, or a cortisol assessment at relatively low cost and with potentially significant benefit. Pay attention to your mouth tomorrow morning. Not just whether it is dry, how dry, whether drinking water resolves it fully and quickly, or whether it persists. Whether you also experience fatigue, frequent nighttime urination, dry eyes, or unrefreshing sleep, write down what you notice, not for a day, for a week. Patterns that repeat across a week are signals. Signals that repeat across a week deserve investigation. Your body has been leaving this message for you every morning. Now you know what it says. Drop in the comments, do you wake with a dry mouth? And after watching this, what do you think is causing it? I read every single one. Subscribe to the channel because next week we are going into another morning signal most people dismiss without understanding what it means. And I will see you in the next video.